This is the point. We are continuing the discussion dealing with the investment policy in the country. And I would like to switch on to our dear guest, retired Major Wikipora. We are interested to look at the foundations of investment, especially as far as Uganda is concerned, even before the NRM government. And one of the aspects that was emphasized in those early days, especially during Gov'T 2, 1980s, it is believed that agricultural cooperatives and other cooperative societies were drivers to local investment. Yet, another comparative analysis I would like to refer to, and which is different from what we have today, is that for the late Idi Amin, the former president, was much more against the Indian foreign investors that were here in this country, and a bit it looks to have affected the economy. I'd like to pose that to you, and we look at what we lost during the days of Amin, the late Idi Amin, and also what we lost when we saw the decline of these agricultural cooperatives, and how best to recover back to the best.
Okay, cooperatives in the Gov'T regime, as you are citing, were mainly producers cooperatives, and the key crops that stood out was cotton, which was made in north and northeast, and coffee, which was central and western Uganda. So these were two key cooperatives, but I think there could have been in tobacco as well, and tea. So cooperatives were, to an extent, it has a lot of positive, in that it could support its producers with money, logistics, and finance, but could also get ready market, and therefore eliminating a monopoly buyer. And so the farmers had ready market, so to say. It has its goods, but of course it has its challenges as well. Remember our good old boy of Ntare School, who died recently. Kanyomozi was a minister, and I'm told it worked well. Now, when NRM came to power, I have insistently hinted on the global aspect. This was a time when IMF World Bank was getting economic reform globally with that capitalist or private ownership. And that is why I told you earlier that they would even tell states to stop spending on health, because that is a social infrastructure. Stop spending on education, because that is a social infrastructure. So this element touches cooperatives. In fact, they looked at cooperatives like a communist thing, like a socialist idea.
It's socialist, much more of
socialist. A socialist idea. So the liberalization of the economy that came with IMF World Bank is what actually fought cooperatives. People now, of course, because NRM was in charge, they now look at it like it's NRM which did it. But this was the global trend, okay? So it fought otherwise something which could have been there, because NRM in any case wanted pro-people arrangement. But that is what it is. So that is the genesis of how cooperatives was fought. It is part of IMF World Bank arrangement of private ownership. They insisted on the GIST principle of capitalism, private ownership, not your socialist cooperatives and association, no. So that is what led to the death of cooperatives, okay? Now, that was the cause of the death of cooperatives. Now, what the current government is doing is to revive it. There's a line ministry, and they are all attempts at reviving cooperatives. Because as I said, it wasn't a wish of government, it was a global economic trend. But now the ministry is in place, and a lot is being done to try to revive cooperatives. It is in process. And it will come with its advantages, of course with its challenges, if it will, and which will be addressed. So that is as far as cooperatives is concerned. It is soon going to come back.
Thank you.
Now, the other aspect is the aspect of the Indian. Amin,
they call it an economic war.
Amin, in its attempt to bring the economy in the hands of the Ugandans, did it the crude way. The crude way in that it decreed and chased them. Some school of thought thought that if we had to do it the non-crude way was to go systematically to promote the indigenous. Not to give, because for him he said he dreamt and that they should go, and he was in Tororo, if I remember this, he was in Tororo, and he dreamt from Tororo that he's giving 90 days, get out. So that's why he said it's a crude way. If, for example, I had to do it the smooth way of promoting the indigenous, so that they come slowly and compete, it wouldn't have been this mess. Now, when he took the economy from the Asians and gave it to the Mafuta Mingi then were the local indigenous, Mafuta Mingi, and they are literally associated. Mafuta Mingi means a lot of fats.
But do you know, people still, there are some people, the Ugandans, who still appreciate him.
Yes. So when he gave it to the Mafuta Mingi, meaning those with a lot of fats, which was referred to the size of the stomach anyway.
Yes, please.
So they didn't have the skill and they didn't have the capital. The economy went down. Also coupled up with the resistance that Amin was getting from the power that be by then. It was kind of an economic embargo, economic sanctions. So the economy went completely. Now, the current system is to empower indigenous, developing capitalists, developing capitals of Uganda. And that's why this group is encouraged. In fact, this group is encouraged to an extent that you're not supposed to be in micro. You are encouraged with the view that you graduate to the next, isn't it? You graduate from macro to small to top, God willing, become a big capitalist. That is the vision. It's not the idea of having this association and keeping them in their status. No. If one can be entrepreneurial enough to graduate from macro to next level to the next level, that is it. So that is a smoother way of doing it. So we encourage foreign investors, at the same time protecting and promoting. Like we put it, the law, which I should have actually cited it being the lawyer, is that once you have the law, then you have the checklist. Whoever benefits, benefits. Because it gives now a criteria. Whether you're foreign or a local investor, then you benefit under the law from such incentives or such immunities, for want of better words, exemptions.
Allow me to come in this case, and you will take it on. We have our graduates, and those who are not graduates, the formal and informal, either with an employed or not well built up capacity to do business, but yet they are very serious to do business. And one of the questions they raise say, I don't have capital. And one thing I miss from him, he will answer by himself, is to know whether by the time you register under this federation, whether it could be a credible ground for one to access capital if you don't have capital, and you'll be able to develop from the small to the medium. To you, General, Major, retired Major, how has the government linked up with such formations, having around 700 people, 700,000 members, to ensure that they are able to access easy access to credit, which is affordable?
It could know better the sources of funding, but let me say the little that I know, in that it's not only about money, it's about other safeguards in other policy areas and legislative areas. It's not money per se, because there are some Ugandans, if you give them the guarantee and the atmosphere, they are able to prosper on their own, not so, without necessary government handouts. So, and that's why he's saying, one of them, he gave the example of saying during COVID, when there was hard up, they're the ones who went to government and said, you know what, the situation is hard up, can you do ABC for our people? So let us not look only on the financial aspect. There are many things that are done in the legislative framework, in the protection safeguards for these people so that they do. But there are many things like microfinance center. Such funding is available. There are also other funding which are available in the other development banks that is there. So the funding is there. and the members knowing. And many times has been, including housing finance, there's some funding which are there for investors, for our local investment. But as I'm saying, it's far and over than mere finance. Many of our Ugandans are in the 700 or so, 7,000. They are there to say, if you give us safeguards, we have been there and we are there. We can do much more. Of course, more funding would be needed, but we can talk more on the accessibility of other finance systems.
Yes, I'm coming to you. Equal opportunity is what I'm talking about, especially for credit, access to credit, and which is affordable. So because the research shows, reviews, whereas we have the, a growing economy with the informal and formal business, but also those who are declining at a higher rate, and because of some of such challenges, issue of the high taxation, tax dues, licenses, URI, how it deals with the people, and you find someone is about to run away or run mad when they do bill you. What exactly is in the insight of that dealing, especially the challenge facing our macro, micro, and small enterprises?
Okay, so thank you.
I talked about like 3 issues at once.
You talked about 3 issues. The first one is an issue that affects what I would call the policy environment. Because for business to run, the policy environment must be conducive. The government entities, the laws, the regulations, the policies should want this business person to succeed. And as a federation, I would say the bulk of our work is there to work with government to make sure that we make improvements that will make the life of a business owner easier.
Equal access to.
If you look at the issue of taxation, for instance, government's task is to increase domestic revenue mobilization through taxation. Okay. Our tax to GDP ratio is still low, so we understand why they are looking for money. But we are saying we shouldn't make tax extremely regressive. We shouldn't burden so much the very few businesses that are formal and are trying to comply. We should focus on broadening the tax base and not necessarily deepening it. Deepening means once John comes and you see he's running a good business and is willing to pay money, then you pile all kinds of taxes on him to ensure that he pays, or for others who are hiding. It's just like previously where in this country where people used to steal, to have a lot of illegal water connections. You'd find that all the illegal connections, the bill goes to the one who is willing to pay that bill. Thankfully that has been rectified, and we are telling you, please, let's make life easier for those who have chosen to be compliant. So that's at the policy level. We look at issues of taxes, we look at issues of multiple taxation, we look at issues of multiple licenses, we look at issues of business registration, we look at issues of informality, all these kinds of structural issues that are likely to constrain the growth of a business. Now, I want to turn to your second question about access to credit. Access to credit is a complex issue. A business needs many things to succeed. One, a business needs a conducive business environment, what I've talked about. A business needs access to affordable financing, not necessarily credit, but affordable financing. A business needs access to markets, because you cannot survive just on credit. Your business must actually be making money to be able to grow. A business needs access to skills, because businesses are made by the human resources.
So for what if you don't have found out with your members, have you seen that they are comfortable with the conditions they encounter when they are seeking to access credit and affordable financing, as you said it?
Now, on the issue of financing, we have an issue. One, there are structural issues that are limiting SMEs from accessing financing. One is we have an issue of high interest rates. The cost of money in this country is very high. And the number of issues, part of which is inflation, but some on the supply side, some on the demand side. On the demand side, some SMEs are not formal, they don't keep records, so no bank is willing to risk by giving them money. There's also a bit of dishonesty So those are issues on the demand side. So you can't just sit there and blame the banks as if the SMEs are necessarily doing the right thing. On the other hand, the banks tend to look at SMEs as very risky, and their pricing models are such that SMEs will find it hard to get money. And then we also have this issue of government borrowing domestically, because government is competing with SMEs for money, and the financial institutions will therefore tend to go the government route. Now, that is credit. If we look at issues, if you look at our capital markets, because that's the other way through which businesses mobilize capital, through equity, equity investors and so on. That has also not been very well embraced, because one, our capital markets are liquid, there's not much money there, you only have NSSF and a few guys who are investing here and there. But the other issue is that SMEs are also not sensitized on how they can grow their businesses through the capital markets. So this is the situation, and it's been made worse by the pandemic. I've told you inflation is now at 10%. The central bank rate has also been increased to around 10%. So that would mean that if you want to take out a loan now, it will be extremely expensive. Or if you are servicing a loan right now, it will be extremely expensive. So these are the issues as to why the cost of credit in this country is still high. So there's a lot of work to be done, both on the supply side and the demand side. And as you see, it's not just a governmental issue. Some issues need to be solved by the SMEs themselves. Some issues need to be solved by financial institutions. Some issues need to be solved by banks. For instance, curtailing inflation, rather by curtailing inflation.
So who helps to emerge? The good thing, you've categorized them very well.
Yes.
And at the end of it all, as a transformational leader,
yes,
we don't want to leave it at a laissez-faire context of our discussion. At the end of the day, we should bridge the gap and harmonize.
At the end of that day, it is government's role to ensure that different actors are acting in a harmonized way to solve those problems. I've told you that today we validated that second national private sector strategy. Those are some of the issues, because that strategy highlights who should do what to solve some of those problems. Not just to cure issues of access to finance, but issues of access to markets, issues of access to skills, and other things. So that is the role of government, and I would say that government is attempting to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Retired Major, I'm coming to you on a concern that we've raised in our discussion. We look at the available opportunities. Uganda is an agrarian economy, and of which one of the potential economic opportunity is agriculture. But yet, the macro investment support to agriculturists in Uganda seems to still be minimal. Our targeted production capacity, where we can feed the whole of Africa, it is my dream, where we can feed the whole of Africa and other countries, still is requiring a lot to be done. In the pro to achieve that, what do you think, what is exactly the government doing to be at the cutting edge? An agrarian economy which is greatly financed in agricultural investment.
Of course, there has been a cry that agriculture has not been given the priority that it deserves. And that cry may be genuine or may be out of lack of the data of the investment that government has done. But of course, to an ordinary person in the field or on the street, he wouldn't like you to convince him with data. He wants to see physical things that are happening. So that cry is there, that not much attention is given to agriculture. So, but however, so much has been done with various programs dating many, many years ago. But crudely, if you may see, there was recently a lot of deliberate effort on wealth creation, and this was basically through agriculture, where even the military was involved. The idea of involving the military was that they're disciplined and they can follow chain of command. If you are told, please deliver this cassava stem no soldier would state he will deliver it. So all these extreme position of involving even the military were attempts to ensure that agriculture is brought in the mainstream and to counter the fears that not much attention is being done. Of course, you can see it in the percentage form in the budget. Somebody would say, hey, if you're saying that, look, the budget, defense took this, roads took this, education took this, agriculture took only this. But a lot has been done, as I said, and I know now there are so many other framing of interventions that agriculture is doing that will revamp agriculture. Last week I was in Mpiji, in Kamprigisa, that place which used to be for remand home for children. Part of it was degazetted, so to say, for Agricultural Institute, which was built by South Koreans. The idea is that an intervention of revamping the mindset in agriculture be done so that we pick up with the mindset of really revamping the agriculture. And I visited the institute. The institute is really so perfect and so good. I met my friends, the Dauka, they're in charge of the prince. So a lot is being done for agriculture. And not only in terms of the production itself, but the biggest challenge also had been in the marketing. Remember, for a long time, people were saying, look, we produce cotton, we don't have buyers. Or even in cotton areas, they said we produce cotton, our cottons are rotting. So a lot of revamping is happening in that area, not only in production area, but marketing, but also in other institutional areas, like the institution I'm telling you, like the mechanization of agriculture. A lot is being done, and I know progressively agriculture is hyping up in terms of budget, because some people will want to study it from the budgetary ventures. That if you said you're doing much, how comes very little money is given?
Thank you. I will be coming later after this session. Especially, I will be desirous to have your say on what the government is strategically ready to achieve in utilizing natural resources through investment and investors. I have a case of like Kabal and elsewhere, where some minerals that are potential areas of investment and that may attract in foreign investors are not utilized, and so forth. And yet it looks to be our steps to achieve that is still demanding a lot. We'll be talking about that. And as we go for the commercial break, I'd like to hear one statement from you, Mr. Kapkungulu, on the realization of the targets by your, how best can they realize the targets, the small scale and the medium, in terms of looking at the available opportunities in this country, not only being just entrepreneurs, but to be really manufacturers?
Well, I don't think everyone can be a manufacturer, though it's desirable. If you look at the structure of our economy, I think the service sector is now contributing the most to our gross domestic product. And then, somewhere you have manufacturing, you have agriculture, and so on. So I think what we want to build going forward is a knowledge-based economy. Our young people who have been to university should be able to sell their knowledge across the world, because the beauty with knowledge is that you cannot impose non-tariff barriers. Sometimes it's even hard to impose taxes on this kind of knowledge.
Do you have a dream of looking at the 64% of the youth? If, like I said, you recruit like our retired major, they could recruit some soldiers. Let me call it a war against poverty. And to have a dream and to assure the viewers that it is possible to have a population of the 64% unemployed youth to be entrepreneurs.
Of course, because the issue is, I think government needs to get out of this idea of throwing money at problems, and assuring people that we are going to solve the problems on your behalf. In Tandikwa, no, don't worry. UPE, no, don't worry about school fees. Don't worry.
So the government should shift
PDM.
that.
No, we're not saying government shouldn't help, but we are saying government should allow people to take their own initiative. See, we shouldn't perpetuate laziness and dependency. Of course, there are issues, there are structural weaknesses that need to be solved. If there are issues of access to finance, young people are starting businesses. Let's make sure that financing is available. Let's sure that they have access to the right skills. But let us not say you will, so long as you are in a group of 10, just come and pick the what?
Pick the money.
Yes, this won't work. So for me, I wouldn't take this approach. I would take the approach of, as I've said, the knowledge-based economy. Because, you see...
That's a very powerful one. I'm liking it.
As Ugandans, we cannot create enough jobs for Ugandans here. That we must accept. See? But what caliber of services are we exporting? If you're exporting domestic maids, if you're exporting security guards, that's a problem. But if you're exporting computer engineers, software designers and all these people, then that puts us in a different league. That's what India is doing, by the way. So we are saying we must have we must harness our human resources, because that's the core of, that's the secret to our success.
Best. Hold on as we come back after this session. Oh, that's a good one. Brigadier Major, isn't it true? This thing will come and